Southeastern Bow Hunter Podcast.
Welcome to another episode of Southeastern Bow Hunter Podcast. This episode, we are going to have Mr. Evan Williams from Hoyt come on here and talk about everything that Hoyt's got going on for 2025. We're also going to talk about his how his season's been going and how he got into his position at Hoyt. As you guys know, I've been shooting a bear for a really long time, and I love the bow. It's great, but I've wanted to really get some other bow companies on here, and I've honestly shot a few Hoyts, a few buddies Hoyts, and some other brands and stuff. And I would have to say that Hoyt honestly is up there with the best. I mean, it's definitely a brand that I think a lot of people trust, and I'm very, very excited for this episode. So before we get started, obviously we got to do the partners. We're gonna do this one really quick because I know that Evan's waiting on us. We got Working Class Bow Hunter. Obviously, I'm wearing the hat. Wear them pretty much every episode. Last week's episode with Kurt was awesome, so I hope you guys really enjoyed it. If you want to go help support them, go to workingclassbowhunter.com and look at all the new merch, everything that they've got, and use the code SEBH15 to save you 15% at checkout. Next up is going to be the Boutique. I say it every week. I don't think I need to go into as much detail as I used to because a lot of y'all probably know about them, but the Boutique is a custom arrow wrap company, and Michael makes the absolute best wraps that I've seen in the industry. He can literally make anything that you want. So go to the boutiquellc.com and look at everything he has to offer. And then if you want to set up a custom order, you can do that as well. Whatever you decide to get, use the code SEBHP for free shipping. Next up is going to be Osseo Gear. Once again, Osseo, I've been repping them for about 2 years now. Joe is what I consider to be a good friend of mine. He's been having a hell of a season. Osseo is honestly one hell of a camo brand. The pattern's amazing. So if you want to check it out, get somebody, I guess you could get yourself a Christmas gift, or you could, get someone in the family or a friend a Christmas gift. Go to osseogear.com, use the code SEBH, and that saves you 15% off site-wide. Next up is going to be Summit Tree Stands. Obviously, I've got my Summit really putting in the work this year. Have been able to, utilize that tree stand to its fullest, and I am very, very thankful to be working with Summit. The Dual Threat Pro SD has been awesome. I can't wait to see what new stuff they come out with and how they can improve on certain things. But if you want to go to summitstands.com and get you a new tree stand, some accessories, and same thing as Osseo. If you want to get this stuff as a gift for somebody, use the code SEBH15. That also saves you 15%. Next up is going to be Scout Tech. Ryan and the boys are out of town. They are, I believe, in Kansas. And at the time of recording this, I think they're still in Kansas after, when this drops. I'm not really sure where they're going to be. He told me, but I don't remember. But anyway, Scout Tech is a great camera brand. They are coming out with a new camera soon, next few months. There's a lot of big changes coming, and I've been using my Scout Tech cameras all season. And I've really, really enjoyed what they do. So go to scouttech.com and get you some, and see what I'm talking about every week. Next up is going to be Ace Hardware and Social Circle. Actually plan on going up there sometime soon and shooting the new Hoyts. Was going to do it this past weekend, didn't have the time, but they cover everything. They got broadheads, bows, arrows. They'll work on your bow. They'll tune it for you. Awesome guys up there. So go up there if you feel like making a drive. For those who don't live near Social Circle, trust me, it's well worth it. Next up is going to be Bergie Bowsmith. Bergie is actually coming on the podcast in a couple weeks, so we're going to talk about everything that's been going on with him. I really want to dive into his bow tuning process a little bit and see what kind of wizard dust he throws in there to make them all tune. And I know that it's a machine, right? But Bergie's an awesome guy, and I am very, very thankful to be working with him. So go to bergiebowsmith.com and use the code SEBH10 for 10% off everything there. He is now a dealer for a bunch of different brands. Go check him out. Next up is going to be VPA. Once again, American-made broadheads, all fixed blades. They've got over 70 different types that you can choose from 100 grain to extremely heavy. They've got you covered. There's also a lifetime warranty for every broadhead that you buy. So go to vparchery.com and pick out whatever it is that you want, and then get put that promo code in there. It is SEBH10. That saves you 10%. I'm gonna run through these next ones a little quick. Dialed archery. Obviously, I shoot a Arxos. Really looking forward to eventually getting the proof. Great company, great people, American made, and in my opinion, the best site that I've ever used. So go to Dialed Archery and look at all the new stuff that's been dropping. I know there's more coming. Next up is going to be Camo Dust, only scent control product that I trust. I've got some stories I could tell anybody listening that wants to know, but long story short, I was in the tree, the wind shifted, deer in front of me, the wind was blowing directly to him and literally did not smell me. So I trust Camo Dust. I think you guys should too. So go to camodust.com. I recommend you get the 6-pack because it does last you the entire season, and just a great product. Great product. Next up is going to be Full Force Hunting Products, and this is last but not least. But Full Force Hunting Products is a company based out of Michigan. My buddy Dan owns it and runs it. He has scent products, attractants, the whole thing. So go check him out either on Facebook or the website fullforcehuntingproducts.com and look at what you want to try out. And trust me, you will not be disappointed. So that's all the partners. It's gonna be a really fun episode. I'm very excited about it. As you guys know, before we dive into it, I always have to give it up for the only reason that we're even here is Jesus Christ. This podcast, I owe it all to him. It's his podcast. He does with it what he wants. And, I just really hope that me bringing him up every single episode for like the past year has really helped some of you guys get through some stuff. We all go through it every day, right? But I can see things turning around. I've gotten people reaching out saying, "Hey man, I really like the fact you're doing this." It's not for me. I'm not doing it for me. I'm not doing it to get those messages. It's all for the glory of God, which is what we all should be here for. So that's yeah, man, that's just extremely important. I'm going to keep doing it every episode, and hopefully you guys are enjoying it. But anyway, intro's over. Evan, I believe, is waiting on us. So let's get into it with Evan Williams from Hoyt and talk about all the new stuff Hoyt has coming for 2025. All right, guys. So today on the Southeastern Bowhunter Podcast, we have a very special guest. You obviously read the title, so y'all are listening to this for a reason. But we've got Mr. Evan Williams from Hoyt. We're going to talk about all the new bows that are coming out for 2025. And those who know me well enough know that I'm a huge fan of Cam Hanes and a huge fan of bone collectors. So I've always been a Hoyt guy. And I'm really excited about this. But Evan had a great season. We definitely are going to cover that. But before we, get into all the nitty gritty, man, what's been going on with you? You told me about a fire drill today.
Yeah. Honestly, like it's been hard to get a hold of anybody or do anything really probably 5 weeks now. Had a buck pop up my trail cameras back in Kansas that I've never been excited about a whitetail, and this was the first one. I was like, all right, like I have a target. I am dedicating everything to this one tag, this one animal. Then I had a second one hit in another spot. So I had two good bucks I was really trying to go after, and it was just a whirlwind, three trips back to Kansas and doing some of it on unpaid leave and just trying to go get it done. So it's been a whirlwind trying to get things done around here and working what I can, taking the headset and everything with me, trying to get podcasts, on our end moving and still going on the Hoyt bow hunting side, but trying to keep up with emails and phone calls and get things scheduled and update everything, getting ready for a launch in the middle of one of those trips. It's just been crazy. So as you can, like you said, with just trying to get me to sit down and get something on the books. So I've got about 4 or 5 other guys trying to line some things up, and they're asking for dates in January, and I have no clue what things look like that far out. So
yeah. I mean, scheduling, I had Kurt Geyer from Working Class on last week, right? And Kurt's actually been kind of like a really big part of sort of moving me along in this whole podcast thing. And one of the first things that he and I talked about was the whole scheduling thing. And he was like, dude, there's going to be times where you reach out to someone and they really want to do it, but they're super busy. And he ended up being one of those guys, just like how you were, where I asked Kurt to come on again about 2 months ago, and I just got him on last week. So
yep.
I never knew how crazy like the podcasting side of things was actually going to be, because sometimes, man, I will literally have someone line up, something happens, and then I'm like, okay, well, what am I going to do this week? And then you scramble to find something, and it usually turns out good, but it's just, it's crazy. But with you being with Hoyt and, trying to kill this buck and all of this other stuff, I can't even imagine it. Like, that sounds wild.
Yeah, and trying to do a launch in the middle of all that, and make sure I have things done so that, I don't have things leaving, on the burner and fires going, that, my team has to pick up the slack. So it's kind of what I'm around for, is to make sure that, they don't get put in those situations. So
Yeah. So, all right. So you were talking about the launch, and I do want to touch on that, but I kind of want to know how you got into Hoyt. Like, how did you get to where you're at? Because it's got to be like, in my opinion, I would assume it's a crazy story, right? Or is it just you went
yeah,
on Indeed, they were looking, and they were like, "Hey, Evan, come on."
no, in fact, they weren't looking, as far as I know. Um, so my background is in competitive shooting, on the rifle side. So I was a
Okay.
Division I collegiate rifle shooter. Took a redshirt year, so I did that for 4 years plus my fifth year for academics. And then when I graduated, I had the opportunity to move to Colorado Springs and start training at the Olympic Training Center through the resident athlete facility use program, which means I got access to everything that the facility had to offer except for physically living on site. So I had sports med, sports psychology. I had use of the fitness and the weight facility. I had use of the range. I had use of all the equipment with the gunsmith shop and everything I needed to do my own work and be able to continue to train and compete. But because we were going into an Olympic year, that was the 2008 games, and I did not make one of the two slots that we had available. So basically, for every single sport that is at one of the Olympic training facilities in an Olympic year, if you don't qualify for the team, even if you're on an RA program, you get asked to leave until games are done and you go through that requalification process.
Mhm.
So because I didn't qualify for the team in '08, I was allowed to continue to use facilities and all that, just couldn't stay on complex.
Yeah.
So when I was looking to get out to Colorado Springs, found a house to live in, needed a part-time job because again, all my bills were still kicking in from school and everything. So I took a job at Sportsman's Warehouse, was working in the footwear department, and I took a part-time job at the local pro shop. And a couple months goes by, and the Sportsman's Warehouse group wanted to utilize me in a different role because they knew of my position with the pro shop. They wanted to transition me into archery manager. Well, boss of the pro shop didn't like that because now it's a competing thing. And he goes, I'll hire you full time. You just come work for me full time, around your schedule. And what was great about that is the pro shop didn't open until 11 o'clock. We closed at 9. So I could still work 6 days a week and get overtime, bonus hours, and
Yeah.
still be able to train and compete. So we did that for a couple of years until I officially stepped back and retired from the sport, and started shooting a lot more competitively, and was doing 3Ds and indoors and all that. And, every once in a while would, check at Hoyt and check some other industry manufacturers for position openings, and didn't know if I wanted to go that route, or, potentially at some point when my boss retired from the fire department, if I wanted to maybe buy the shop from him, if that was going to be an option. And it was something we had discussed. And I'd been with him for almost 9 years, and I had applied for 3 different jobs out here. And finally, boss came to me at one point and goes, maybe you just need to shake some things up, and you've been shooting Hoyt and you've been applying, and that hasn't panned out for you. He had a pro contract with Hoyt at the time. Our other full-time guy had a contract through the sales rep, and he goes, why don't you just pick something else up and shoot it for a little bit, and see how it goes, see if it ruffles some feathers, and if not, it'll help sales in the shop, because we had Hoyt and Matthews and a couple other suppliers, and Hoyt and Matthews are our two number ones in the shop. And so we were at, best buying power with them, getting the best price, and therefore making the most margins on them. And there was a couple other companies that we weren't quite there yet. So, collectively we decided I was going to go with another brand.
Mhm.
Picked it up, went to a tournament, and won after having a bow for 2 days in my hands from that manufacturer. And
Holy crap, dude.
he calls the sales rep up and goes, hey, I need to order 2 bows. I need a target bow. I need a hunting bow. These are the specs. And the rep's like, yeah, no problem. what's the rush? And he goes, well, Evan's going to make a switch. He picked up your bow. So he took these two bows off the shelf. So I need to replace these for inventory and then, get him a price. And he goes, bows are on the way. You tell him they're taken care of. They're coming out of my budget, and let him know if he needs anything. I got him handled, because he'd been trying to get me on his staff for a while. And a picture of me at full draw in my shop jersey was taken by our kid that was doing all of our arrow fletchings, one of our high schoolers at the time.
Mhm.
And that made it to a sales rep in the industry that is best friends with our Hoyt sales rep. And he left his house on Monday morning, and the tournament was on Sunday, drives an hour plus into the Hoyt office and puts his phone on the desk of our national sales manager and says, I think we got a problem in Colorado. He takes that picture into the VP of sales and marketing and says, we need to have a discussion. And within 2 hours of them opening on Monday, I've got a phone call from the VP of sales and marketing wanting to get me on the phone. So my boss's wife comes into the shop about 10:30, and she already knew about the phone call because they had called Bill first.
Oh, wow.
He goes, hey, did you get a phone call from Mike Looper this morning? And I said, yeah. I said, I saw I had a missed one, but I was, over here making some tweaks to my setup and just wanted to get this done before I did anything. And she goes, I'll open the shop. You need to step out back and go take that call. So I take that call, and he has me check my schedule, and I talked to Bill about when I can get a day off that week. And he goes, I already got you slated for Wednesday. Why don't you go ahead and book that trip? And flew out to Salt Lake City on Wednesday after a Monday phone call and interviewed. And not that Friday, but a week later is when I got a job offer to move out. And that was in July. And they had worked it out with my boss at the time that I would start the middle of September because I had drawn a Colorado elk tag. And my boss is like, I need him until this time. He's got an elk tag. So if you can take him on this day, that gets me taken care of in the shop, that gets his hunt taken care of. And then he's yours after that. So moved out September 15th in 2000 and what was that? 2015? Yeah, 2015. So
Gee, that's so crazy, dude. I can't even imagine like getting a call like that, you know?
yeah. Mhm.
I mean, that's just especially so you were right. I mean, as far as I've always seen it, Hoyt and Matthews have always been like the two kind of top dogs in the industry. Everybody I know either shoots a Hoyt or a Matthews. I've shot a bear just because, it that's what I started with. And then as time went on, I just was like, all right, well, let me just get one of these. And I mean, it's a great bow. It really is. But after seeing what Hoyt has been doing and really just honestly comparing the bear to other brands, which I'll just say that, um, the innovation lately has just been crazy. And so that's why I want to know like where you started and what you've seen from when you were there to I guess now. Cause like I think the only Hoyt bows that I've actually shot was the Torex VTM 31 and I believe it was a RX4 Ultra. And every single one of them, there was a certain feel to it that I've never really felt like with any other bows. You know what I'm saying? And so I mean, how did they go? Like where were they at when you were there? And how did you guys get to where it's at now? Because where y'all are at now is honestly mind blowing with the changes that I've seen.
Yeah, and I don't want to say that we've made these huge, incredible jumps in 10 years, but looking back, going, man, I've either been at a pro shop or at Hoyt for almost 20 years now. It is really incredible looking at, okay, my first bow was the 2007 Vectrix Plus
Wow.
that, at 36 inches axle was 4.8 pounds and was cranking at 314 feet per second or something like that at the time. And you look at where things have come. We've gotten smoother on draw cycles. We've gotten shorter limbs. We've gotten shorter axles. We've come down in mass weight.
Mm-hmm.
We have significantly increased not only the amount of speed that bows are producing, but the amount of energy,
Yeah.
and so when you look at trying to build a setup and you're looking at tune charts and trying to figure some things out, I've got to remember every time I look at an arrow chart is, man, I need to be on the stiffer side of this because a lot of those charts haven't been updated most recently with, these incredible speed increases.
Mm-hmm.
Let alone, okay, I'm trying to build an arrow with this much FOC or shooting
Yeah.
this much front weight versus this much back weight, or I'm going to put lighted nocks and a wrap and X number of vanes on and trying to account for all those in the spine. But it really is fun to see. We've slimmed down the grips. Um, Going to a shorter limb, squatting the axle, but still lengthening the riser and going more
Mm-hmm.
parallel on that axle measurement. So your 32 and 33-inch axle bows now are holding and shooting and performing better than 36 and 37-inch bows were 20 years ago.
Wow.
So it really is incredible. You've got to look at, string take up and cable payout on how the mechanics of the cam function. You've got to look at the string angle, the effective string position of the angle once you get the full draw. Because
Mm-hmm.
axle is one thing, but how that string physically comes off the cam at full draw can completely change what a 29-inch axle feels like versus a 30 from another
Yeah.
manufacturer. If you have that cam lobing over where the bulk of the cam is above the axle, so that string angle is up here versus down here, if you're changing that angle by 3, 4, 5 degrees, that's a huge change into how it's going to affect your anchor and how you're going to get your nose onto the string. And now you add, elevation up or downhill or, shooting down out of your tree stand into that. Like there's so many things to really think about when it comes to fitting and functionality and performance of a bow.
Yeah, I mean that when I first got into it, I always thought it was just you buy a bow. And I used to be one of those guys that would be like, "Oh man, I could go to," and I did it too. I don't know if you can see it, but my bow laying over there is a blackout intrigue from like 4 or 5 years ago. And
Mhm.
I think that bow cost me, there was a deal at Bass Pro, it was like 270. And I was like, "Oh, dude, you can get a bow that, you know, outperforms or performs just as good for less than 300 bucks." And then I really started diving into it and I was like, "Oh no, I was
Yeah.
way wrong." I mean, even comparing like, mid-level range bows to, I guess what you guys can consider, I'm not going to say that the Torx is like the mid-level bow for Hoyt, but it's definitely a little, I would say it's maybe what, another 100, $200 higher than I guess the mid-price range average. But you
Yeah,
get,
and I think it
oh,
depends on what company you're looking at. Because the Torex, depending on what dealer you're at, I mean, most shops I've seen it, barebow Torex is going to be 599. You can run it as a package for 750.
yeah.
And then you have the XT, which is an upgraded version, so it's got a slightly different limb, cam, and roller system.
Mhm.
Um, that most of the time I see those around that 799 price point.
Yeah.
So I think that midline, like if you're looking at, what Mission and some of those other manufacturers are coming to market with, um, it's going to be priced right there with them. Some of the bigger differences are going to be the amount of adjustability that you have. Some manufacturers in that range are only going to give you 1 inch. Some will give you
Mhm.
half inch and 5 inches to work with, which can lead to a less performing cam system because you're trying to put so much draw length range into one system.
Mhm.
Um, you've got differences in, the limbs, the pockets, how you're layering and laying all of those up, and then even a material of the riser difference, magnesium versus aluminum. And then I know there's some other manufacturers that are using some other stuff, that I would consider grade, below magnesium, but
Yeah. I think just the innovation we've seen with bows in general lately has been honestly mind blowing, right? And so I want to focus on, I guess we'll just dive right into it. So, like the new models. Okay. So last year, you guys came out with the RX-8 and the RX-8 Ultra. You had the Alpha X, awesome bows. I never knew, and I want to confirm that I'm right on this. Do you guys dry fire every single bow 1,500 times?
Every single bow, but
Oh,
every single model.
got
Yes.
it. Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Because when I
So
heard that,
the
I'm like,
yeah, the dry fire and the cycle are part of our product um, testing.
mhm,
So the first thing we do when we start going through product design is we will in engineering, they have their own machine shop. So we have our main production shop and then engineering. So they can cut out samples and version one, version two, all the way through what they need.
mhm,
So they'll cut V1 riser out, V1 cam, and they'll build a bow, take all their measurements, do a bunch of their standard testing, and then it goes right into dry fire testing. And it goes on that machine, and it's just cycle after cycle after cycle of dry firing. And if
so
at any point in that test we fail, we can get to 1499, pull back to 1500, boom, something fails. Whether that's something on the riser specifically or somewhere else, if it fails, okay, this is what failed. We're going to make an adjustment to this. Go, redo the design, recut a sample, boom, back to 1,500 dry fires. So every individual bow that goes out of here does not get dry fired 1,500 times. It
gotcha.
physically can't. One, we don't have the space, we don't have the machines, and we don't have the time to be able to do that.
Yeah,
But every single production sample that we're going to build is going to go through the exact same test. Once it passes dry fire, it's got to go into 1,000,000 cycles. So that same handle that just passed the dry fire goes right into the sample machine to do cycles, and it starts the cycle, and it goes for 2 weeks, just every single minute of every single day with somebody, going in and periodically checking on it, and it'll run on weekends, and that cycle count just keeps going. And if at some point it fails the cycle test, okay, we know it passes this test, but it failed here. Okay, what failed? What was the cause of it? Boom. And now you have a brand new riser that you just cut because of something over here. So guess what? You start from scratch. 1,500 dry fires. Let's go.
dude, my mind is
If
blown.
you if you change one thing, you change the whole thing, right? So
Yeah.
every version that we go through gets tested, and it has to pass every single check. And if version 10 riser passes here and it passes here and it passes here and it fails over here, okay,
Mhm.
we cut version 11 and we start back at square one, and version 11 has to pass everything all the way through. And when it does, okay, now let's get into the fine-tune testing. How does it look? Does it pass all these other checklists that we have? Okay, now we got to turn the machines on. We're going to cut our first samples through, called first article,
Mhm.
and it's going through paint, it's going through film, it's going through decaling and putting medallions on, going through assembly, goes all the way through the boxing procedure, and then that bow in that box gets passed around to all the other departments, and they all have their own checklist. Okay, does this look the way engineering designed this? Does this look the way engineering designed this? Okay, do these medallions match what marketing wanted? Yep, this one does, this one does, this one does, and it goes through every single department, and every single one has their individual checklist on that one model before they go, yep, it's good, send it to production. Next.
That's insane,
And
dude.
and when you look at you're doing that for, this year we did it for, you had RX9, RX9 Ultra, RX9 SD, AX2 29-inch, AX2 33-inch, AX2 SD. I mean, that's 6 bows.
That's
And there
insane.
is years that we did 17 between target and
Oh
hunting combined.
gosh, even the target bows go through all that?
Yep.
Wow. So all right, I'll be honest. I was already considering changing bows after this year to a Hoyt, and I think you probably just made the decision much easier for me because
I'm glad I could
that's
help.
insane. I mean, do any other and if you don't know, totally understandable, but do any other companies put that much effort into the product to make sure, like, hey, we test it this way, we are giving you something? Because in my opinion, after learning that, you guys do shoot, I thought it was every single bow, which I should have thought about because it's like there's no way. The amount of bows that you guys make, there's no way you'd have the time. But hearing that they, each model gets dry fired, tested, that was crazy. Because that's one thing I've always been scared of doing is a dry fire. And
Mhm.
I'm like, coming up, it's like, all right, you dry fire it, the bow's trashed. bent cams, broke limbs,
Yep.
sometimes broke riser.
And again, we test that because again, it's a safety thing, right?
Mhm.
And I know guys, really good buddies that have dry fired the first time they've ever done it, and string jumped cam, we've got a cam that got messed up, or we got a limb that got destroyed. Don't you guys test these? It's like, yeah, and we test them in a perfect world environment, like it is in a Hooter shooter. So depending on how you get into the grip, if you drop back and you've got induced torque, let's say you're a thumb side pressure guy, so you're actually cranking in this way,
Mhm.
okay, you're now taking that bow and you're rolling it. So your string isn't coming off that track perfectly on that cam, right? Okay, if I'm
Yeah.
inducing string side for a right-handed archer, thumb side pressure, okay, my riser's doing this. Where's my string going to go? Well,
Off.
it's got to go somewhere, and you
Yeah.
have changed that position, right? So it comes through and it misses the cam track and it blows up a spacer, or runs the edge of the cam and comes down and gets onto it. That's part of the reason that we have some of the other safety features involved with the build of the bow that we do. When the RX1 first came out in 2017, pretty sure it's a 2017 model. We
They
had
come
the
out
limb,
every year, right?
we had the limb hangers. Yep, new bows every year. So with that limb hanger, it's basically we're drilling in the back of the limb, and we're creating a post system that sits on the limb behind the axle. Because what we found when we tested limbs from every single manufacturer in the industry is when you have a catastrophic limb failure, the first thing that happens is the axle wants to shoot out the back of the limb. And it was everybody. Then I don't care
Hmm.
who you are. Okay. How do we significantly reduce or completely eliminate that? So we had this whole project through our R&D team, get rid of this instance on a catastrophic limb failure. We don't want that axle moving. Get it done.
That's crazy.
Okay. So we created a project. R&D takes both feet and they're running, and they create our limb hanger system that goes up right behind the axle. And the first year, it was this big teardrop looking metal piece
Mhm.
that was on the top of the limb going down in through with a set screw on the bottom. And we've reduced the size of that overall system, but that's what it's there for. Because if something happens, if your string breaks at full draw, or a cable goes, or something unknown happens. Maybe you touched your string with a broadhead as you knocked it and you didn't realize it because you're knocking an arrow for a follow-up shot and your broadhead grazes one of your cables on the way in, and you rip that sucker back, and all of a sudden the tension shifts in the load, and boom, that goes. Okay. Now those axles are going to want to blow out. We completely eliminated that just by adding that hanger on the back of the limb. Because again, it's a safety thing. We don't want
Yeah.
our consumers getting hurt. We don't want to get hurt if we do something in the field that we weren't ready for, or again, accidents happen. Murphy's Law is Murphy's Law. It is what it is. And when it's your time to, mess up or have something happen in a situation, it's going to
It's your
happen,
time.
whether you want
Yeah.
it to or not.
That's so crazy. So, all right, let's just dive into the new bows, right?
Okay.
Because last year, like I said, y'all had the RX8, RX8 Ultra, Alpha X. Was it only those three? For some reason, I'm blanking. I want to say
So we
was
had we
there.
had the 8 series. So you had the RX8, which was the shorter axle, and the 9, sorry,
Yes.
the 8 Ultra, which was a 34. And then
Okay.
you had the Alpha X series, which was a 30-inch and a 33.
Got it. That's what I was thinking. All right. So
Yep.
what's new for 2025, man? Because what you guys have done, and I'll tell you my opinion on the new stuff once we get to it. But I'm I'm excited for these new bows, man. Because look, I've
And it
got a
does
short draw length.
it makes two of
It's
us. It really does.
well, and I
So
saw one for the first time. I was gonna go shoot one last week. I didn't have time, unfortunately, but I am gonna go to our local shop. That's a dealer for y'all and go shoot. The RX8, RX9, or I'm sorry, RX9,
mhm.
and the AX2 just to see which one I like more. But dude, I walked in there just to say hey for a split second, and I saw the Alpha or the AX2, and I was like, I need to leave. I was like, God, it's
It
so
is a
nice,
it's a
man.
slick looking bow. It really
Yeah.
is. Yep. Yep. And so the Alpha AX2 series builds on the Alpha X from last year. That's why it gets the X2 designation. So if you're looking at one on the shelf, it's going to look very similar
Mhm.
because aesthetically, the way we design and cut the riser, it's building on the Alpha X premise of last year, right? So we're going to take that same general look and geometry and design,
Mhm.
but now we're squatting everything down. So the Alpha X30 became the X2 29, and then we shortened the 33, so it's now a 32. Got a little bit of a mass weight reduction in both of those because of that, as well as changing the included shortstop stabilizer. So we now have the shortstop 2.0, a little bit shorter in overall length. It's got a different weight system. It's got a different de-resonator or vibration dampening system built into that. So out of the box weight, we are, I think, 0.4 pounds lighter than last year, alpha out of the box.
Okay.
Um, with and it's always hard to judge speed because again, we test everything at 30 inches.
Mhm.
And again, we shortened the axle on the 30 going down to the 29. So I think we lost like two, three. I think we lost like 3 feet per second
Mhm.
in that 30-inch draw length range. But everything else, because of how we designed the Gen 4 cam, every other draw length was an increase. So 29 and a
Yep.
half, 29, 28, 28 and a half. Like it is insane. And it's across the board. So the Alpha series saw the least amount of gains in speed from last year.
Mhm.
The RX-8 Ultra to the RX-9 Ultra is mind blowing. So we have a geometry shift in the aluminums, and a reduction in mass weight because we shortened everything and we changed that included shortstop 2.0. On the
Gotcha.
RX-9s, we have the RX-9 short axle to axle is still a 30-inch axle to axle, 30 and a half,
Mhm.
but the Ultra is now a 33.
Mhm.
We changed the riser, and again, if you look at it and you aren't looking very, very closely, the first thing that's going to come to your head is, oh, they didn't change anything. Because aesthetically it looks very, very much the same. But what we
Yeah.
did is we shortened up the head of the pocket. So you have the riser come up and you have the span for the pocket. And we
Mhm.
shortened that up. That allows us to use the same pocket on our target bow, the concept series, the
Mhm.
aluminum Alpha X2s, and the carbons. So from a manufacturing standpoint, we have less parts we have to machine, so we can focus machining. It's easier to get parts out, get them anodized, get them back in, quicker builds. The other thing we were able to do now is go to the AXL limb, which is a slightly shorter limb than we had on the carbons last year.
Mhm.
A little bit shorter brace height and a big increase in speed. So at 30 inches, the RX-9 Ultra is only 8 feet per second faster.
Yeah.
Only. You've got a 33-inch axle to axle bow that's shooting 340 feet per second. And at 29 inches, it's 19 feet per second faster. At 28 and a half, it's 18 feet per second faster. At 28 inches, it's still 16 feet per second faster than it was last year.
Oof.
So what we did on the Gen 4 cam was 100% performance based. We have one base cam in the Gen 4, and we have 5 modules that cover the entire range of draw length. So instead of having 2 modules like we did on the original HBX and HBX Pro, and last year on the Exact, we had 3 modules. Now we have 5. So what we do is the number one mod covers the shortest draw length range and it has 1 full inch. So on the AX2 29 and on the RX9, those two start at 25 and they go 25 to 26. And then from there to the longest draw length offered, it's not a full 1 inch of adjustability in each mod. You get 26 and a quarter to 27, 27 and a quarter to 28, 28 and a quarter to 29. And it's 3/4 of an inch and there's no overlap on the way up.
Dude, that's what I was so excited about. So, like, really, the thing that got my attention this year was the speeds that I was seeing because I watch a lot of like MFJJ stuff.
Mhm.
My buddy Bergie has been telling me about all this new stuff that's coming out. And when I saw all that and saw the speed, because I like to look at like what a bow's I guess advertised speed is, and
Mhm.
then see either if I tested at the local shop or watch videos where guys are like, okay, so this one says it's 348. Well, we shot it and it was 325. Same exact specs that they're offering. And I'm like, what the heck, dude? Like I had a bow one time that was a 33 ATA and it was rated at 348, and I guarantee you that was not happening. So
But you actually said something right there too. So it was rated their ATA guidelines, correct?
yeah.
Okay.
Oh no,
There
I'm
is
sorry,
a
IBO. My bad.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. IBO versus ATA guidelines. Incredibly stark differences in those two. IBO does not have a testable draw length. It doesn't say you have to shoot it at this draw length. What IBO says is you can shoot that bow in the longest position that you manufacture it. You cannot shoot it above 80 pounds and you get a
Mhm.
2 pound allotment, and you must shoot 5 grains of arrow weight per pound,
Mhm.
not including the 2 pound allotment. So if we manufacture a bow at 34 inches, we have an 80-pound limb offering, and we shoot within that 5 grains, correct?
Mhm.
Okay. Well, I'll test it at 34, maybe 34 and a half, and I'm going to give my limb an extra 2 pounds. So I'm going to test at 82, and I'm going to run a 400 grain arrow because that's 5 grains per pound at 80.
All right, a little bit of a technical difficulty. I don't know what happened. I was telling Evan earlier that this happens from time to time. So we'll just add it to the list, I guess. But anyway, we were talking about like the difference between ATA and IBO testing. And you were explaining how if you could get a bow to 34 and a half at 82 pounds, and then it cut out after that. So where
Yeah.
would you go from there?
Yeah, so again, IBO doesn't have a set draw length requirement for testing. So we're gonna build a bow and it's gonna go to 34 inches, and we're gonna squeak a little bit more out of it. So on a draw board, it's gonna measure 34 and a half. Okay.
Mhm.
I'm going to build a set of limbs that's going to be 82 pounds because I get 2 pounds of allotment that I don't have to account for in my arrow weight. And I'm going to shoot a 400 grain arrow. Okay. So my testing parameter is 34 and a half, 82 pounds, and a 400 grain arrow. And let's say I whip that sucker out at 360 feet per second. I can advertise that bow at 360 feet per second because IBO is not as stringent, right? I have a specified grain weight and I have a specified draw weight with my allotment of um, margin of error. Okay.
Mhm.
What ATA did a couple of years ago, well, decade and a half ago or something like that, is they said we want to have tighter testing parameters so that when people see numbers, they have a better true reference of what this bow is actually capable of.
Mhm.
And so the ATA adopted their standard, and it has been the Hoyt standard ever since. And it says you test a bow at 30 inches, you are allowed 1/4 of a draw length of an inch longer in that draw length range. Okay, so your 30 and a quarter can measure, sorry, your 30 inch can measure 30 and a quarter on a draw board, and you are still in that margin of error. Okay.
Mhm.
You shoot it at 70 pounds, and your allotment is 0.2 pounds.
Oh
So
wow.
70.2, you're fine. 70.3, you're hot. And
Huh.
then they still adhere to the 5 grains per pound, but because your weight allotment is so much smaller, you get a much more precise arrow ratio for your draw weight. Okay. So 30 and a quarter max, 70.2 pounds, and a 350 grain arrow. So when I'm an archer with a 28 and a quarter inch draw length and I want to build a bow at 70 pounds, and then I start putting all of my specs into this formula of, okay, every 3.3 grains above 350 on my arrow, I'm going to lose 1 foot per second. every half inch of draw length under 30, I'm going to lose 6 feet per second.
Yeah.
Every pound plus or minus 70, I will gain or lose 2 feet per second. So if it comes out at 72, I'm going to gain 4. If it comes in at 69, I'm going to lose 2. Okay. Using those numbers, I can now come up with a very, very close, realistic world of this is what my hunting setup is going to produce when I go to the field.
So I'm so happy that we got to this point because there was something that me and T-Bone talked about. It was sometime earlier this year on his last episode that he did recently with the podcast. And one thing that we discussed was how bow manufacturers as a whole, right? T-Bone gave a very good example. He's like, if you've got a guy that's going and buying a bow and it says, it says on there on the tag, shoots, 340, 340 foot a second. In his mind, if he's not doing the research or just let's talk about the average Joe, he's going to grab that bow. And I was guilty of this too. It's like he's going to grab that bow and he's going to buy a set of arrows and he's going to set it all up for him. And in his mind, he's thinking this bow's going to be shooting 340 foot a second. He goes to the archery shop, shoots it through the chrono, and he sees 260. And he's like, what the heck? So we both were talking about that because I've experienced it. I'm sure you've experienced it. I know he experienced it. And one of the things we said is like, we just sort of feel like the companies need to be saying like, hey, up to, or like how you were saying the ATA standard, just something like that. Because man, I've seen quite a few, videos and stuff, and I've had buddies that have gotten new bows and they'll shoot them and they're like, oh yeah, man, this thing shoots 335. They shoot it and it's like 318, and I'm just like,
Which is still
hey, man.
screaming, right? Like,
Oh yeah, that's
the hunting
bad.
setup is like, whoa,
Yeah.
try to control a broadhead.
That's I think right now with my setup, because I'm a 27 and a half inch draw, or well, technically. So I know you talked about this on Bo's podcast, and I'm glad we're here again too. I I measured myself a while back, right? And I was 27.2. But the bow that I've got only ranges from, it's got the half inch increments, but it also is long in the draw. So right now I have it set on 27. I know that I'm over 27 and a half. There's really nothing I can do about it because I don't.
Well, there is things you can do. Because you can twist the string up a little bit and that'll shorten your draw length.
Okay.
And for fine tuning like that, I always recommend twisting up versus letting twist out. So I would, a couple twists in your string, you'll have to reshoot it back in, but that will shorten your draw length up. And that's one way to do that incremental change without having quarter-inch draw length adjustments, if that's not an option. You can also look at potentially manipulating your D-loop. Maybe your D-loop is 3/4 of an inch and you could get away with shooting a half inch, depending on the material and the release that you're running, what your anchor point, and some things are like. But there's always like little things and tweaks that you can do to make that fit you the absolute perfect. And in a perfect world, I would rather you shoot a 1/4 inch short than a 1/4 inch long.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so that's a thing I've been sort of dealing with, since I started was thinking, I mean, I was shooting 28 and a half at one point, and this was not that long ago. And I'm over here just like drawing it back and I'm all the way back here. And I'm like, got my arm hyperextended and I'm kind of leaning in. I'm like, oh, this is good. And then I'd shoot it and the string would just, hit my arm and all that. Eventually I got to the point where I'm close enough. I mean, I can draw it back. I've killed a doe this year. I've drawn back on other deer. It's been a very long struggle this year, which we are going to get into your season because I'm sure we can relate on some stuff maybe, but
struggle for sure.
Yeah. But yeah, man, I just like I was saying, when I saw that Hoyt's now coming out with these new incremental adjustments and you got 5 different mods, I was never a big fan of like the singular mod for a singular draw length. But I also knew that having like a full one mod system where you go from 24 to 31, you're losing so much efficiency there. So when you guys came out with that, I was just like, there it is. I was like, that's what you needed to do. So what would you say out of the 2 new models? Which of the 2 do you think is like the one that you would prefer for the guy that's going to be in the market?
I mean, I'm an aluminum guy personally. I like a little bit more mass weight around my hand. Um, Traditionally, when I've looked at the specs, before this year, being that 28 and a quarter, 28 and a half inch draw length guy, because again, I'll put a couple twists in my string and I can get it where I need to.
Mhm.
Um, that put me in a better position for speed and efficiency in the 33-inch long aluminum versus going to a carbon. So I've been running aluminum the last couple of years. And even this year, when I had the opportunity, I put together an AX2 32, and I'm just absolutely loving it. So I am an aluminum guy. I've always shot really well with that 32 and 33-inch axle length. So that's where I've really stayed. Um, when I have shot carbon, I have had to add so much extra weight because I have such an aggressive shot. I pull very hard. So I have had to add a lot of extra weight to my bow just to get to hold the way I need to. If I get too little weight and I really start pulling, like I really start going all over the place.
Yeah.
So the aluminum being a little bit heavier has kept the mass weight right around my hand. And I've just gravitated towards that the last couple of years. Um, the guys that like carbon, I mean, they're doing it because they like a very lightweight bow. They're running the 85% let off. They're running, minimal weight on stabilizers. They are taking a minimalist mentality where I want the lightest bow I can go to the field with, because if I'm on that elk hunt or mule deer hunt and I'm going for 9, 10, maybe 11 days, however long I've got, because this is my big hunt of the year, I'm using as much vacation as I can. If I need to cover 16 miles a day, I'm going to cover 16 miles a day, and I don't need my bow holding me back.
Yeah.
So, and there's concessions that you can make with that. If I changed my release up and went to a button or an index trigger instead of a hinge, I would be able to command a shot a little bit more, so I could get away with less weight because I'm going to be more active in the squeezing or the execution of that release versus the hinge, where I'm pulling and just letting it happen when it's ready to happen, and hoping that animal doesn't move. And so my choice is to go with the heavier setup and stick with what I shoot more year round.
I gotcha. Yeah, I mean that's again something that I've kind of been learning is all my other stuff has always been on the heavier side. And this year I've got a lighter bow and it's kind of the same thing where I've added weight to it. I'm like, dude, it just seems more stable when I'm drawn back. And yeah, it might be a little heavy on the grip hand, but it's like at least you're not moving around because having
Nope.
the bubble and all that stuff. So what is it's kind of just a random question I just thought of. Josh Bomar, Cam Haynes, and Joe Rogan. Okay, those guys all have 90-pound Hoyts.
Yep.
I have two questions for this. The
Okay.
first thing, and really, okay, I actually have one question for the 90-pound. But anyway, the first thing is, can anybody call you guys and say, "Hey, I
No.
don't care what it costs. They can't
Nope.
do it."
Nope.
So
Cannot do it.
how did they? What was the whole process with them getting those 90-pound Hoyts?
You'd have to ask somebody at a much higher pay level than me.
Gotcha. Okay.
So none of those went through me. In fact, I didn't even know Josh had one. I knew he was shooting an Alpha X 33. I didn't realize it was what it was until right after the Utah attack. So that I think that went directly to our president. Um, Cam's got a completely different setup. The reason that he is shooting the bow that he is, when you ask him why 90, is because he can. It's Cam who shoots every single day. When you shoot every single day, you have the muscle memory. You've got that development that allows him to do it. And as long as he can, he wants to.
Yeah.
So
I think he was the first person that because I've been following Cam Hanes since I got into hunting. I mean, I watch the dude's videos and I'm tired and I'm sitting on the couch, right? And I'm
yeah.
like, God dang, you ran 200 miles, bro, and you're
Hmm.
twice my age. It's insane.
Yep.
But I just saw the 90-pound bows that you guys have made. And I'm like, dude, I would love to try one, but I can already hear my shoulder tearing. So it doesn't make any sense like how they do it. But the other thing I wanted to talk about, which led me to the 90-pound thing, was you mentioned specific let off and all of that. I don't want to spend too much time on it because I feel like we could really go down this rabbit hole and be here for hours talking about it. But Bomar did say something about his opinion on, if you're gonna have a specific let off, you want to be in the 75 to 80% range. and 85 is just too much, right? Which I didn't
Yep.
believe at first, but now I'm starting to see it when I need to let down. I mean, what's your opinion on that?
And
Is
that's
there like a
that's where it gets you. I do not like letting a bow down at 85% because literally I'm holding virtually next to nothing, right? From a
yeah,
percentage load standpoint. So when I'm going to let up, I'm literally holding it back, but trying to push the string forward at the same time.
yep,
It is very uncomfortable. I don't like doing it. In fact, I don't do it.
yeah,
I don't shoot anything over 80% let off.
okay, yeah,
So,
because I wanted like the least amount of holding weight because my previous bow was 80%, and I'd always and it was probably just the way I was doing it, but I'd draw it back and I'd think I'm there, and I'd kind of ease the tension a bit, and it would go
yep.
forward. Like I've sent arrows flying because of that,
Yeah.
and
And honestly, like that to me, that is a very, very good argument for being overbowed, right? Because if
yeah,
you can't hold your bow back comfortably, even at 75% let off,
yeah,
you're overbowed, right? You can't handle what that bow is designed for. And so it wants to run on you. So we either need to shoot a lot more and start conditioning for that, or
yeah,
we need to change something within the setup, right? And if you want the least amount of holding weight possible, you need to shoot a lighter bow.
yeah,
That's a better way to do it. And and again, I would still tell you, like, first thing out of the box, that mod foot that adjusts the let off, that's the first thing I touch. 80 screw comes out, it gets moved to from the 85 to the 80, and I lock it in, and that's where I'm going to start. And I'm not going to move it back up. I might move it down to 75, but
yeah,
I'm looking for a specific holding weight out of my setup. And I can do that by either changing my limbs and playing with what my peak draw weight is, or I adjust that let off between 75 and 80.
gotcha. Yeah, I actually had a buddy of mine who had that same problem where he had I forget what bow it was, but he had it at 70 pounds. He dropped back, and his was specific. It was only
Mhm.
75%.
Okay.
And so I remember him calling me up and being like, "Hey man, I'm having this issue. I draw it back, and I'm thinking I'm shooting it right." And he's like, and so I asked him, like, "Well, are you comfortable?" He's like, "No, I mean it's kind of hard." I was like,
Um,
"Drop your weight." I was like, "What are you at?
that
66, 67?"
that or his draw length is too long. So instead of
Oh yeah,
instead of being tied in right here, and I have everywhere up front, I can push and execute a shot. I'm already fully extended in my chest, starting to open up, and I'm coming back off that jaw.
yep,
Well, yeah, that's not at my strongest position. I'm stronger here. You start getting out here and trying to hold against that back wall where you're using smaller muscle groups, it's going to want to run because you're activating smaller muscles that don't want to be activated in that position.
yeah. Yeah, it
So,
was it was a struggle with figuring out what the issue was because it turned out he had a bent cam, right? And then so he gets the cam replaced, comes back, same problem. I'm like, well, drop your draw length a little bit. So he does that. And he's like, it's still too heavy on the back end. I'm like, well, go down 10 pounds and see if it changes. Hell, you can kill a deer at 45 pounds if you need to. Like, you'll be fine. So I think he got to like 55. I think he's at 60 now. And he's already killed a couple deer this year. So speaking of killing deer, though, so before we dive into your season, because I'm very intrigued to hear what happened, or if it's even still happening.
nope,
But
no deer were harmed during the making of the 2024 season. I'll just say
oh
that.
god, okay,
Actually, that's not true. There was a deer harmed. It just didn't go
oh
well
man,
for
all
me.
right. Before we get into it, though, because I mean I've got tissues back here. I might need them if it's that bad of a season, because I will feel terrible. But is there anything new or not new? Anything else that we didn't cover with the new bows that we needed to?
Um, Speed increases. The new cam system is phenomenal. Um, didn't change the grip at all, have the geometry shift. Pick is still a real big thing with us. So the inline system, again, we design bows and accessories to work together. So one thing I know guys, when they start looking at putting together a bow, they're looking at, what accessories do I use? Do I want to carry stuff over? Do I want to buy new ones? Guys, I can tell you this. When you add the Hoyt inline accessories to our bows, they get quieter.
Really? Huh?
Yep.
How?
Now,
Just for people who
the way we have designed those accessories to interface and mount to our bows, the connection systems and the way it is all designed to work together, our bows physically get quieter. And it's not just because of a mass weight. We're putting more weight on, therefore vibration reduction. No, it's because of how everything is designed to work together. It's a system.
That's crazy. I don't think I've ever heard of any other company doing that. Honestly, I've always just heard, oh, the bow's quiet, and you bolt on a sight, you bolt on a rest, and there you go. And that's as quiet as it's gonna get. Huh.
Yeah. We
So what?
it's
Okay. So
it's
what
at least an
accessories are you
11.
talking?
So SL, so if you're going to shoot multiple stabilizers, so front and a back bar, when you mount a Go stick on the front, when you mount an SL sidebar, when you use our Pro Series stabilizers and our super light quiver, the Integrate MX2 series rest, when you put those accessories on, we are at least the smallest margin that we've measured is an 11% reduction in noise and vibration by adding accessories from us.
That's nuts. I'm so excited to go shoot these new bows. I really am. Even though they're gonna be bare, I don't care. Like
And
that's
they
gonna
still
be
feel great that way. They really do. And then just to know like they get better when you put accessories on.
man, you got me hyped. But all right, let's talk about your season. What happened?
So I actually, guys, to be very honest, I had one of the most incredible seasons I've ever had. Um, I was given the opportunity in June to go up to Ontario and to do a spring bear hunt with a couple buddies.
Okay.
I honestly I have never really been super interested in bear hunting. Just kind of wasn't one of those things on my radar. But when this opportunity came, I absolutely jumped on it. So went up to Ontario with a couple buddies, did a baited spring bear hunt and took just a gorgeous, like a 10, 12-year-old boar on the first night we were in there. Um, we were in the stand 43 minutes. I looked down and he's standing 10 yards at the base of the tree, just this big old crease right down the middle of his forehead. And they talk about pumpkin heads. This joker measured almost 20 inches and about
God.
went Boone and Crockett for a black bear. And it was the first black bear I've ever shot. It just an incredible experience. Had a wonderful time with Keith Beasley and the crew from Canada in the rough up there. Um, and then that was kind of the Kickstarter. I've been working on planning a moose hunt for my wife, and in the middle of trying to finalize those details, my hunting partner from Pennsylvania calls and goes, "Hey, I bought a Utah tag. When should I come out? Where are we going to go?" I'm like, "Well, I probably won't be here because I'm working on going to Canada." And he goes,
Yeah.
"Is there any way you maybe can be there?" So in the middle of all that, I pop on X and I look at a couple basins in a general elk unit here in Utah. And I was like, well, this one I think we can get back away from crowds. It's about 8.5 miles back from the trailhead onto where I want to start hunting. And we're both fairly big on the fitness side of things, and we work out every day just to be able to hunt and do what we do. So
Yeah.
he shows up and we go packing in and got into elk. I mean, first night we were back in there and we're in them every single day. Real quiet. It was a lot more being, September 1st, 2nd, 3rd in that time frame. They weren't super vocal, so it was, we know they're using this meadow, we know they're around this water. We're getting up, seeing if we can locate them in the morning, leaving them alone, doing some trips around the area just to kind of get a lay for how things are moving and where they might be coming in from, and doing basically evening ambush sits, and both got opportunities. His unfortunately didn't work out. Bull was 65 yards. Um, Pretty sure he already had us pegged, kind of the way he was acting. We had the wind in our favor, but he was just acting really, really edgy. And
Mhm.
so on film, slow mo, arrows like coming down out of its arc, almost getting ready. You see it kind of start to disappear into where his back would be on the way in, and that bull gets out of the way. You see the arrow go right over the top, and he's gone. And it's just like, and I've never seen an elk move that fast.
Yeah.
So he gets out of the meadow. We go over, recover the arrow. It is completely clean.
I mean,
And,
that's
that
better
was
than a
the
bad shot.
I think the eighth or ninth bull we had seen in that meadow in 3 days. And I was like, well, I don't think it changes the plan because he came in by himself. So next morning, we're right back in there. And that evening, we have a really good 5 point come in with a rag. I get ready to shoot him, and a bull bugles. They push out of the meadow. 9 cows get pushed down. I can hear the bull moving across the top in the rocks. We had already told each other, like, if we get an opportunity to cow, it's a general tag, like, we're taking meat.
Yeah.
And so he goes to draw on one of the cows, wind shifts, they blow out. We hear the bull go across the top, catches up to him, takes him up and over the ridge. We both kind of look at each other and are like, well, that sucked. And I hear hooves, and I look over, and here comes two more bulls coming from my left right into this meadow. And my bow is already in my hands. I literally grab my release, hook up, come back to full draw. He loops around the top of a wallow that's in front of me at 25 yards and then just stands there. And I'm like, okay, click, fuck. And he was 20, I think 26 yards is what we stepped him off at. And he made it about 50 yards outside of the meadow and spent the next 16 hours breaking him down and packing him out back to the truck. And that kind of started September off. Got back to the office, worked for 4 days, and then my in-laws came into town and my truck was loaded, and I took the wife up to Canada and we were going on a moose hunt.
Good
And
Lord,
so
man.
Alberta has a hunter host program. And so my buddy and his wife, we've been working for a couple of years to, figure out all the details and finally got things lined up. And so we drove up into Edmonton and stayed at their house and kind of redid vehicles and then headed up the next morning into the moose area and had I had a moose tag, two bear tags, and a wolf tag in my pocket. And then my wife just picked up a moose tag. And we're seeing a lot of sign. Like there's tracks everywhere. Um, we were hearing some grunting, but not a lot. Um, Morning of day 3, my wife and Heather saw a good bull, tried to make a move on him and didn't realize there was a cow and a calf about 100 yards north of where he was at, where they were trying to cut him off at. Cow and the calf blew out, bull went with. That night, switched tactics, and we're going to come around those clear cuts because you have these big timber cuts, and then in between this 600-yard long, 200-yard wide timber cut, there's another block of timber that matches that size. It's kind of a checkerboard of what is cut and what isn't.
Yeah.
And it's connected by this 2-track system that you can ATV or 4-wheel on. And so we were going to access this entire big block from another direction. And that evening, we're going down the backside, and I look over down this long logging trail, and it's just full of green clover. And I see a black bear, and I'm like, hey, bear. And so Kev gets off the gas, kind of rolls down through this little drive area. I kick open, grab my bow, kick out, knock an arrow, and basically backtrack on this 2-track area. And this 6.5, 7-foot black bear is in the middle of this clover patch, just chomping away. And so I just start sliding right in at him. And every time he'd pick his head up, I'd stop and he'd kind of look around and put his head back down one time and close the gap. And then he picked his head up and he'd look away and I'd range him. And he'd kind of look over towards me and scan and look back. And I'd take a step or two and got to 50.2 yards. And he never put his head back down. I was like, well, I've been shooting this. I know my bow, so here it is. And he turned his head away, came to full draw, click, buried my pin, broke the shot. He runs about 5 feet, goes up a aspen tree, and I was like, oh, I gotta get another arrow in him.
Yeah.
I knock another arrow, and he's up this aspen tree, and they're right in front. So if I'm on this side, right in front of him is a pine, and he is completely covered. So I'm trying to work my way around to get this angle. And my buddy Kevin's like, where's he at? And I'm like, he's up the tree. And he goes, no. And he starts to run and rush this tree. And when he does that, this bear literally, like, I see his claws go, boonk, and he just lets go of this tree 12 feet down, bounces off the ground, and darts across this opening. And we just hear him crashing through the timber. And he's like, come here, come here, come here, come here. So I back out and I was like, what's up? He goes, okay, how was your hit? And I was like, the left and right's good. I was like, I'm right up the back of the front leg. I said, but I didn't realize how tall the clover was. I said, I think I'm low.
Yeah.
And he's like, okay, let's go get the girls down where we want to drop them off for the night. We're gonna go up, we're gonna look at see if we can find a way to get across this North Creek. We're gonna leave him be. We'll come back in a couple hours, check arrow and check blood. He goes, I don't want to go after that bear. I was like, yeah, I didn't hear a moan, so I'd rather be on the safe side. So we go drop the girls off. We come around a corner a mile and a half from where I shot this bear, and there's a 50 to 52-inch bull moose standing in the middle of the trail.
No
And he
way.
just pops the brakes, and I go to get out, and he goes, just slide up. And this bull looks at me and just turns and walks right back into the timber, real slow. And I turn back and I look at him. And he goes, walk real slow up. He's only going to go in like 20 or 30 yards. You might be able to find a lane and get a shot.
Yeah.
I go 300 yards up there and come back around and come back to the ATVs and never saw him again. And the girl's like, we're just going to bail out right here. So they went in after that bull. We found a way across the creek, went in 2 hours later, and my arrow is soaked. There's blood going up the tree. There's blood coming down. You can see the splatter where he hit going across. He's like, okay, we'll come back. We'll find this bear in the morning. We trailed him like about 50 yards that night down into this bottom, and blood just ran out. And it got to where it was basically bare dirt, and so we just weren't picking it up in the lights and backed out so we didn't bump a wounded bear, and got on another bull the next morning, went back, recovered that bear. He'd made it another 35 yards, made it over this little knoll and down into this big cut, and just expired, just beautiful. Like walked up on a bear on his back, just hands folded in front of him on his chest, and
Like he's at a
just
funeral. Just
fun experience.
all
Got
right.
the one black bear that was, 16, 18 yards on the bait, and then another one at 50 yards spot and stock, and got him back to camp and got him all taken care of, and then realized we didn't have a freezer in camp. And so I opened my cooler that I thought my ice was going to be good in, and all my ice was melted. And I'm like, well,
So
what
what
do
do
we
you
do?
do?
And there was a crew that had come in to do some back trail work after a fire, and so they were, pulling the timber back down, basically to do forest reclamation work. And the guy's like, "Oh, dude, congrats on the bear." And I was like, "Yeah, do you know of anybody down around town that might have a freezer?" He goes, "Well," he goes, "I wouldn't go over here." He goes, "But if you go straight down this road to where at T intersections," he goes, "it turns on the blacktop." He goes, "And about 4-ish miles down, there's another small town." He goes, "Somebody over there might." He goes, "There's a little general store. Either he might have something, or at least you'll be able to get ice that you can, pack it around." So I drive 20 miles into town, and this is on a Sunday. And there is nothing open. The general store is locked. The Presbyterian church shares the parking lot. They're all gone. Fire station across the road, completely dark. But on my way in, I noticed a hunting decal sticker on a Ford coming into town. So I go back down to the house and I pull in. I go to walk up, and as I come up to the porch, I notice the door is about half open. I'm like, well, that's a good sign. At least somebody's home.
Yeah.
And I get my first foot on the porch going up the stairs, and this lady like rips open the door and comes barreling out the screen, and just this terrified look on her face. And I'm like, "Hey, I don't want to alarm you." I said, I just need a little bit of help if you can." She goes, "You drive the same truck as my friends that live over here, and I thought there was an accident or an emergency, blah, blah, blah." And I was like, "No," I said, I shot a bear and I don't have a freezer in camp." It's like, "Is there any chance that you have a freezer that you're not using? I can put a bear hide and skull in." She goes, "Actually, yeah." She goes, "We have a rental property we just cleaned out yesterday. I've got a spare freezer in the garage that works and just got unplugged yesterday." So she goes around inside, opens the garage door, plugs the freezer in, it kicks right on. She moves a couple of things in there and goes, "You can just drop it in here." Perfect. So I dropped the hide and the skull and everything in this freezer, and write a little thing up for her in case she would, happen to get a visit from anybody. She's got all my legal information and
Yeah.
run back into camp. And the next morning it's the last morning of the general archery hunt. And so we go out and just enjoying sunrise, and it's like, okay, well, it's, last day and it is what it is. And check the watches, and it's 1 minute till legal light, and Kevin reaches down to grab his call, and when he does that, I kind of turn to stretch, and I look over my right shoulder, and here's a bull moose 80 yards away already coming up this clear cut.
Dude.
He's like, what? And he just freezes. I'm like, there's a bull over your left shoulder at 6 o'clock. And he just kind of does one of these things and goes, oh shit, you're right. And literally, like, as he turns to look, I slide off of this log I'm sitting on. I grab my bow and come right up with my rangefinder. And by the time I got a range on that bull, he was already at 45 yards.
Oh my God.
Like, he's dead. Came back to full draw, and I've got a little poplar, or basically an aspen in front of me. It's about 10 inches wide.
Yeah.
And the bull gets right behind it and stops. And I'm like, okay, what's he gonna do? If he comes across, it's 45 yards, I stop him. I got a beautiful lane, no worries. And he turns 45 degrees and starts coming right at me. And I'm like, oh man. So as he's coming in, I kind of look at Kevin, and as I'm still at full draw, I was like, hey, like, no, don't take a frontal on moose, right? I was like, that's not a good shot. He goes, yeah, no, don't take that. And I was like, okay, like, even at 10 yards, I don't want to take that shot, right? Because I mean, at this point, he's almost on top of us.
Yeah.
He goes, yeah, don't take that shot. I was like, okay. And the bull stops, and he's either right at 20 or just inside of it. And he's kind of looking, do I go south up this clear cut, or, do I go to my left? I don't know which way to go. And he finally just swings his head to the left and just starts coming. So now he's on the same 2 track that we've accessed this cut in. And he's going to walk past us at like 6 yards.
Dude.
And so I'm at full draw. And as he's walking in, I have to lean back and go around this aspen tree. And Kevin is right here next to me. And the bull is walking right into him, and I'm swinging. So the bull's walking in, I'm swinging. Kevin is trying to get himself onto the ground to give me an opportunity. Bull gets right about broadside. I was like, whoa. And he kind of turns his head like this, click, and he looks up, arrow fires, and I ricocheted off a little sapling tree that was right in front of me. Came right off one of the branches and deflect just in front of his back hip. And I'm like, Kev, bad shot. It's back. So Kevin spins, grabs his call. I'm standing up, knocking an arrow. Bull is running straight away. I grab my rangefinder. Kev starts cow calling, and this bull stops.
No way, dude.
Turns perfectly broadside. I hit his head at 69.5 yards, rip that sucker back. And if you've seen the ultra view, the slider sights, they've
Yeah.
got 3 pins coming in horizontally, and they've got a bonus pin.
Yep.
And I absolutely love the bonus pin. I've told them multiple times, like, whatever you do in the redesign, do not get rid of this pin. So with my setup, I run my first pin at 30, then 40, and then 50. And with my speed and everything on my tape, that puts that bonus pin at 72 yards.
Oh no.
So I range him 69.5. I was like, yep, dead.
Send
Rip it back, plant that bonus pin, fuck, and you just hear that arrow whack. Bull lunges, goes 50 yards, starts spinning in a circle, and just dumps over. And I'm like,
Please tell me you got this on
and
film.
he's down. Like, he's down. He's like, what? Like, he got down where you can't see him. I was like, no, he like turned in circles and like fell over, dead. And so we gave him about 15 minutes and walked over, and he's on his back, antlers up in the air, completely expired. And September was done. Never got to see a wolf, but filled my general Utah elk, filled one of my 2 Alberta bear tags,
Yeah.
and then filled my moose tag. And it just happened to be the same moose that my wife had seen 2 days earlier. She wasn't happy, but had to go buy a new freezer, completely stocked up on meat for the year.
Jeez,
And
man.
then from there, it was, getting back to Kansas, trying to get cameras out, just kind of get things prepped and ready. I wasn't able to make it out over the 4th of July weekend like I normally do. So I had no cameras out. I had no blinds set. I hadn't checked any of the tree stands that we had left out last year and didn't get down and taken care of.
Yeah.
The main property we had that we've hunted, there was a specific buck that I was after in there. My buddy had shot him three. He had shot him 3 years ago. I passed him last year, not realizing what buck it was until he walked away, and then went, "Oh, that he's 6.5. That's a different buck. I should have shot him." And I go back in the next day, and he's a very, very cool buck. He's got a real big typical 8 side on his left,
Mhm.
which happens to be the side that he was hit on 2 years prior. His right side is a big fork. And I mean, we're talking 16-inch fork with a 9-inch split brow tine. So he's an 8, but just a goofy looking 8.
Yeah.
And so my buddy had drawn a tag out with me, and I said, "Hey, we're gonna hunt this property." And I said, I got a tree on the east side. I've got another tree on the west side of this big pinch. I said, I've got a blind on the northeast corner. If we need to, I can figure something out on the northwest corner. Like, I don't care what wind we have, we're going to be able to hunt this deer. This is the only deer that we're going after. You're going to kill him. Like, you put the first arrow in him. I passed him last year. We might sit 6 days straight, but we're going to get an
Yeah.
opportunity at him. I know it. And go back to talk to the landowner, and he goes, I know the guy that is running the cattle on there, and he plans on putting his bulls in there for the year. And I don't know if I want you guys in there with him because of the way he is. So I don't want you to hunt it this year. And I'm like, "Oh, you gotta be kidding me." And he's like,
Yeah.
"But," he goes, "I've got another piece of ground that's a little bit bigger. It's 120 acres down on the river. Do you want that instead?" I'm like, "Yep, yep,
Sure.
we'll take it." So made a blitz trip out to go put a bunch of cameras on that and get some boots on the ground to see it. And really focused on making sure that Taylor, my friend, had a good experience out there. He sat that property first morning in there, saw like a 170 plus typical that cruised through, and was out about 40, 50 yards through a bunch of Russian olives, and never had an opportunity. And then the wind changed, never was good to go back in there. Never got that buck on camera. And I was like, "Well," I said, I got another spot. Wind is going to be good for these two stands on that piece. I'll take you over there, let you take a look at it, and I'll walk you down there so you kind of get a lay of it."
Yeah.
Went down in there, and the first morning I had him in there, had him on the south end of this meadow where we had taken a 168 out of on November 3rd. And I was like, "We get randos through here, like between the neighbors and that piece, like they cruise this bottom, and you never know who or what is going to show up."
Yeah.
And I said, when Emily killed her 167 out of here, when her husband came down to go get it with her, he saw like a 170, 175 about 400 yards north working a scrape in the dark. And I said, there's no telling if he's in the area, if he's south or what. I said, but there's a good typical in the area. And so I take him in that morning, and it's Sunday. And so it's opening weekend of bird. I've got family in from all over the country. So we're out bird hunting. I get a message, giant buck on the north end. And I'm like, "How far north?" And so he sends me a screenshot and circles the patch of timber. And he's literally like 200 yards north. And I was like, "Is there any way for you to get out of the stand quietly and make your way to the north in the dry creek bottom in front of you? There's another tree stand 150 yards up, right on the south end of what he's running." And
Yeah.
he goes, "I don't think I can get out." He goes, "I've got a doe bedded right underneath me, and I got a little forky bedded 30 yards away." And I'm like, "Okay." I checked the wind. We're moving you north tomorrow. It's the same wind. We're just going to start working our way into him.
Yeah.
And we did that for 3 days, just worked our way up into him. And in the middle of that, I have a buck hit my mom and dad's home place. I had put a feeder in on a blind right on a hay bale row so that my daughter could fill her tag.
Yeah.
And the feeder is 14.6 yards from the blind. And I have the biggest non-typical I've ever gotten to chase in Kansas on camera at 3 o'clock in the morning. And I'm like, all right, game on.
Yeah.
So I stayed with Taylor, just waiting for this buck to kindly finally start daylighting because on that feeder, like I didn't have any does and I had no bucks that were hitting it during daylight. So I just started keeping a tab on it. And he hit it 4 out of 3. Yeah, he hit it 4 times in 3 days, all in the middle of the night. And the one day he hit it twice, it was like at 8 o'clock in the evening, and then he came back at 1 o'clock in the morning. I was like, all right, he's up, he's active. I've got all the does. Got Taylor to fill his tag, and then just ran out of time. Like, okay, well, I'll go back to the office and just hoping he sticks around in the area because I've got Thanksgiving break coming up and I can take a couple more days. And sure enough, like I'm debating, do I go back? Do I not? He had kind of disappeared and went quiet on me. And then Thursday night, the full Thursday before Thanksgiving,
Yeah.
he shows back up and I'm like, all right, I'm gone. And told my boss, I was like, I'm gonna take off tomorrow on Friday. I've got this buck that's come back in. And I said, I've got the does. It's just a matter of time. I just got to put time in the blind. And sure enough, 5 days of not seeing any daylight from him. On Thanksgiving Day, we are in the kitchen filling plates, and I look down at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I've got 7 does on the feeder. And I hadn't had any in daylight for days.
Huh.
And I was like, okay, I'm eating fast. Shoved my food in my mouth. Got my daughter to change. We got our stuff on. They left the blind. I said, we got to be careful going in. They're going to go right under the bottom. They're going to be bedded within 100 yards of that, and they're going to come back in tonight.
Yep.
So we go down, get in the blind, and at 5 o'clock, she was, Dad, I see a deer. And I said, okay, get ready. I was like, this doe should jump, 30, 35 yards out. She's going to work on the east side because we've got a west wind coming. She'll work on the east side of that feeder. She's going to come right around. She's going to go right into the tube, and you're going to get a broadside shot. So, okay, so she gets ready, and all of a sudden I look over and she's just locked up, like frozen. She goes, Dad, it's a buck. And I'm like, okay. And I kind of lean out, and all I saw was the left side coming, and it's him. And I was like, oh, I was like, baby girl, that's him. That's the buck warrior in here for. And she goes, you better get your bow, Dad. It's like, okay. So I reached down, I grabbed my bow, and he doesn't jump the fence at 30 or 35 yards. He keeps coming. And so we're right on this fence edge. So it's kind of in a corner, and I've got my blind tied off to the north-south fence. So I'm 3 feet off the fence line.
Okay.
And he literally comes to the edge of the fence line right outside my blind at 5 feet. And he's just standing there. And I look up, and through the top of the window, because we left that zipper undone, so I've got a gap about that big. I look up and I see his head start to come down, and I'm like, oh, he's gonna jump. So I come to full draw, he jumps, and when he stops, the carbon rod and the fabric of the blind is right in the middle of his entire body. And I'm like, this buck is at 10 yards. I'm at full draw and I don't have a shot. And so I'm at full draw and I lean to my left. And I need to lean far enough. If I can see my pins, my arrow's going to clear. And I lean over. And as I do, my daughter, who's up towards the front of the blind, leans forward towards the window with no face mask on. And he's already staring at her. And he turns and he starts going straight away. And he's not sprinting, but it is a very, very moving with purpose jog.
Yeah.
So I slide back over to the other window that I dedicated to film out of, and rap, rap, rap. And on the third one, he stops and goes broadside in a wide open alfalfa field. And I'm like, he's 30. He's 30 yards. Bury my pin. I hit my click, and I'm like, he's 35. Rose that 30 pin up a little bit, and the shot broke. And he dropped so hard, and I hit right under the spine.
Oof.
was about 5:15 by the time all that happened. So we gave him 20 minutes. We go out, headlamps, find the arrow where he jumps the fence. I got a little bit of blood, and he went down into this big ravine draw full of cedars. I'm like, we're just gonna back out. We're gonna let him lay overnight. If I caught the top of the lungs, he'll go down 100, 150 yards, and he'll probably start to slow down. And within 200 yards, he'll want to bed up, and we'll come in. We'll find him in the morning. It's gonna be under 20 degrees. He's not gonna go that far
Yeah.
if it's a good hit. And so I don't sleep at all. Get up in the morning, get breakfast, get all the kids ready, and pretty much all the kids want to go. So I'm trying to get kids suited up for 20-degree temperatures. And we go down and we start on the south end because we don't want to bump them onto the neighbors if we can help it. And get down into the bottom of the draw. And I send my daughter up onto the alfalfa field side so she can walk the top of that. And she gets 3/4 of the way up and she goes, Dad, there's a lot of blood up here. And I'm like, oh, I'm 300 yards from the blind right now. And I go up there and sure enough, I mean, there is just pools of blood, like 6, 8, 10 inches, and it goes to another one. There's another, and then another dribble, and it goes to another, and sure enough, it's right onto the neighbors. So we called Jason. It's like, hey, Jason, we got a wounded deer we shot last night. We got blood across your fence, and we can see it on the ground on your side. Can we get permission to pursue and try and find this deer? Yeah, sure, no problem. Cross the fence, follow him down into the bottom, does some weaves, stays in the bottom, comes up, goes up into a fresh spring growth alfalfa field. They just put it in this year.
Yeah.
So it's like 3-inch tall shoots. And tracked him for maybe 80 yards across that on hoof prints. And then just lost everything. There were so many deer tracks out there. So I go over to the east field edge that goes onto the next neighbor. Dad goes south, and I'm cruising, looking at every single lane going in, and I find another drop of blood. And that was the last one going on to the next neighbors. And we were over half a mile away from where I shot him.
Dude.
So I was on the phone with a good buddy of mine, Josh Sparks from Midwest Whitetail, the next week, kind of going over the shot and what happened and what I think happened. And he goes, okay, how big is he really? And I was like, well, grab a calculator. I said, I'll pull his picture up. So I pulled up one of the pictures and I started scoring him and he's adding stuff up. And I was like, okay. I said, that's all 17 points. What do you got? And he's like, 186. And I'm like, yeah. I said, I figured he'd be right about 190. Sad part, I think he's only a 3.5-year-old.
What?
The good part is I think shooting the expandable that I went in horizontally. If I would have went in vertically with the cutting diameter of that broadhead, I would have either cut the spinal column and paralyzed him and dropped him right there, or I would have caught the top of the lungs. There's no doubt in my mind where that arrow went with that broadhead. One of those two was going to happen with a vertical hit. But with a horizontal hit, you miss everything. You get enough blood. It looks like good red blood. There's no bubbles because you didn't hit a lung.
Yeah.
And so I think he's going to be fine. I haven't seen him show back up yet, but we didn't see him for the first time last year until I think it was on Christmas Day is when he showed up. So mom and dad just have a spot that we don't run a lot of cattle on it. I think he's running about 15 head right now between him and a buddy. So they don't decimate the stocks when we have them out there, and the way their spring went, they had a lot of weather crop damage. So there's a lot of stuff on the ground. We have 4 stock ponds on 400 acres. We've got a fresh spring, and because of having cattle in the pasture, we've got solar and water tank on solar. So, I mean, we've got the food, we've got water. That north-south draw is 15 to 17 feet deep, just lined everywhere with cedars. So you get down in there out of the wind, and it's a great situation for late season.
Dude, if he's still alive, you didn't scare the absolute crap out of him, he'll be back.
Yeah, and I think I know where he lives, looking the direction he went and, paying attention to my neighbors and when they hunt and where. I've got a pretty good idea of where that buck is living.
Yeah.
There's no more ag around him. And I mean even decent stocks to be able to go and feed on. The corn that was around there, it got harvested and immediately baled for cattle for silage and sorghum and putting out. So there's nothing really left for them to forage on. So I think that's what ultimately pushed them up to us was they had bred the local does, crops had come out, and we are the next best option.
That's crazy. What broadhead were you using?
So I run the Evolution Outdoors ferrules. That particular head, I ran the Whitetail Fury, which is a 2.3 inch cut.
Gotcha.
So it's what I shot my bears with.
Got it. Got it. One thing about me that a lot of people who listen to this know is I'm a broadhead nut. Like I've talked hours and hours on this thing about broadheads, arrows, and all of that. So when you said that, I'm like, God, what head did you use? So that, gosh, dude, that's an
And
insane season.
we're
Like
we're,
God was
we're
looking out.
literally 2 inches from being perfect.
Yeah. Well, not even that, but like the bear stuff. I mean, God was definitely looking out for you on that trip, man. Like you got the moose, some random lady's house you went to, she had a freezer you could use. Like that's insane.
Yep.
My God, dude.
It's
So
been a blessed year for sure.
yeah, for I mean, without a doubt. So like, is there any other because we're still in December. I mean, you still have stuff to hunt, right? Like you still have time.
Yeah, Kansas goes until the 31st,
Okay.
$4. After that, it's all tags revert to doe only tags. Um, if he shows back up, there might be a chance for a second trip. We'll see. Um, Other than that, probably not. We'll just, hope he survives and let him get another year older. The typical 10 that was on the other property, he's still around, he's still active, mainly nocturnal. He's a 160, 165 class that I think is 5.5 years old. So um, I'd rather not go back just to shoot a buck.
Yeah.
I'd like to see him get another year older and taking $3 off the same property. It scares me a little bit genetically. So I'd rather not do it if I can help it. Um, and I've got a trip we're planning down to Alabama and potentially Georgia here, either right before or during the New Year's. So
Oh,
try to hunt some late season stuff. I got some buddies back there that always need help taking some does off. So
yeah. Yeah. Well, being in Georgia, man, I can tell you that we have a lot of does. We
yeah,
have
yeah,
tons of does. I've
yeah.
got a spot 5 minutes from my house that, and it's a very long story, but I'll give you the short of it. I watched this buck all year long. Named him, my daughter named him Trike because he used to be a big six, like really big 6 point, and he broke his main beam this summer.
Oh,
So over there, followed him all year long, had these deer because we can bait in Georgia. So
mhm.
had them trained. I mean, I have a video I can send you of this deer, this doe I named Vicky. I had just put out 4 bags of corn and she comes trotting through the woods, just walks up basically right to me. And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay. I was like, well, you get a pass. And the long story short, man, I have sat that place most of early season this year. I saw trike one time, messed it up because it got really dark. Buddy of mine was waiting on me to go track his buck that he shot. And so I was getting out of the tree and I set my bow on the ground. I'm still up in the tree and the bow touches the ground and trike comes walking up 15 yards. And I'm like, bruh, no way. So hold on. I'm not giving up, right? So I'm slowly pulling it up and it makes it just off the ground and starts spinning. And he looks over and sees it, runs up, and this is on 1 acre. So he runs up on my grandparents' driveway, goes up to the road, and I'm like, okay, well, I still have like 2 or 3 minutes left. I'm just gonna get it all the way up,
Hmm.
right? Get my bow up, clip on. I don't shoot with my quiver, but I have my quiver on. That's how quickly I did this. I'm like, screw it. It's 20 yards. It'll be fine. Wait about 5 minutes. It's really getting dark at this point. I can just barely see because it's a power line. So I've got more light
A
coming
little
in.
bit more light. Mhm.
Yeah. And I'm like, well, I really need to go. So same thing. Put my bow on the ground. As soon as my cam touches the ground, guess who comes out at 25 from the woods across the power line? And I'm like, I'm just gonna swan dive off my tree stand at this point. I was like, there's nothing I can do here. And tried it again. And he actually saw the bow and me this time and just right into the next
Yeah.
tree. and disappeared about 3 weeks later. So now that place is a doe spot, which is
Hmm.
how we got there. Because if you're coming here to kill does, we have a
Hmm.
lot. So I think it'll be fun if you get to do that. One thing I wanted to ask you before we wrap this up, you got me thinking about with all these trips you're doing. It's like kind of, I'm seeing like goals that I have is to go to Ontario, Alaska, Utah definitely is one of them because you guys have some major mule deer. Do you do a lot of mule
Hmm.
deer hunting out there?
I honestly, I hate to say this, but no, I haven't. I think the big part of it is when we're in season, like my schedule is so crazy and hectic
Yeah,
that between, hitting 10 out of 12 tack events and three other events during the summer, and then, typically we don't have the moose hunt, but I have one big elk hunting trip with a buddy. And then I try to take 2 weeks off to go home to hunt Kansas and, be with family.
yeah,
Um, it's really hard for me to justify take an entire weekend away from my family when, our schedules being what they are and dad being gone as much as I am anyway. I haven't. And I would love to.
yeah.
At some point I will. I'm building points to be able to do that. Um, Potentially more than just a general tag. Um, because from everything I have seen and witnessed, it's very hard as an individual to be successful consistently. When you look at the guys that are consistently successful year after year after year out here, it is guys that have a very, very good core group of buddies
Yeah.
that you might have four of them out at any given time while one guy's in an office, or one or two of them at least are out. And so their boots on the ground and their most recent information about deer location and who's where and what's going on is very, very up to date.
Yeah.
And me not having someone that I can do that with, I literally, it's like shooting ducks in a pond. You can turn that shotgun loose and you might get one or two to hit, but who knows what it's going to be. And yeah, for me to tell my wife, hey, I'm gonna go and hunt Saturday and Sunday, when I haven't seen any of them all week because of my schedule, my wife's working schedule, and my second business on the side and coaching and all that. It's just like hard for me to justify some of that sometimes. So
I get that.
we have some really good opportunities. The winter kill a couple years ago did not do us any favor. I mean, I'd say we're pushing upwards of 90% kill off rate from that. And so um,
Whoa.
there's a couple good bucks that did hit the ground this year, in some of those areas that were affected. But overall, your age class is down, your population is down. So you, like me, the unit I'm looking to go hunting is a unit that was luckily not affected by that, which is why I've started looking going that direction, because I can go hunt that, and numbers are already at a rate where you know they weren't affected because of that weather. So
Yeah,
it's not a high population area, but they weren't affected by it. So
I got you. My thing with it is like, I love whitetails, but my two favorite, I guess, antlered species animals are definitely mule deer and caribou. And like, we don't have those here. Okay.
yep.
So, you might be able to go to the zoo and see one that they call a reindeer or whatever, or go to Bass Pro and see the stuffed ones. Like, that's my thing for it. Cause I'm originally from Illinois and all I've ever known was whitetails. But I grew up, and it's crazy I'm not more obsessed with elk because I grew up with a an elk farm 10 minutes from my house. And when I was a little kid, we'd go there. Me and my dad would go there and we just watch them. I mean, they had them all fenced in. You could sit there on a port or on a bench and just watch them, hear them bugle,
Mhm.
hear just watch them fight. And there's something about Western game that is so interesting, I guess, because I feel like for us, and I'm not saying all whitetail hunters are like this. I mean, I've definitely put in the work to get on the deer that I'm on, but it I feel like you earn it a little bit more out west in some ways, you know.
Mhm.
I mean, look, like we were
It's
talking earlier, look at Cam Haines. I mean,
Yep. Your Western guys, and again, not that they're a different breed, but the Western and the Eastern bow hunters have a different mentality
yeah,
because of the species that we hunt. Like, do I enjoy working out? No, not really, but I know the benefits of working out because of what I do and where I hunt.
Yeah.
There's no way that my buddy and I kill that bull in Utah and get him out in 16 hours from 6.5 miles deep.
I would have died.
It doesn't happen if we are in the physical conditioning and the shape that we are in.
Yeah.
We went through 9 liters of water a piece in 16 hours, and we were still dehydrated when we got down to the truck.
Wow.
So like there's just things that your body goes through on a Western hunt that you don't get to experience
Yeah.
outside of a Western hunt. And that's not to take anything away from a whitetail hunt or hunting turkeys or any other species that anyone out there is hunting or how you have to hunt them. That's just the
It's just
fact of the
different.
matter. Like you've there are things that you're going to go through hunting out east. There are things that you're going to go through hunting out west. There's different things you're going to hunt if you want to go to Mexico or to Alaska or overseas hunting sheep or any other species that you can in the stands, right?
Yeah.
There's a challenge that you have to overcome both mentally and physically in every single hunt. So
It's
it's how
crazy.
you prepare for those. And if you know it's coming, it's a whole lot easier to prepare.
Okay, so I've got plans to go to Colorado for a mule deer hunt in the next 2 to 3 years. Should I start training now?
100%.
Okay. Okay.
Because again, I would look at it as why wait until you draw the tag
Yeah.
and have that much more work to do where you could start now and either go at a slower, more comfortable pace and get to the same ending because you have 2 or 3 years to do it versus,
Yeah.
oh, I drew the tag and now I have 5 months to go do the same amount of work. Okay, you can put yourself in a much better situation and go at maybe a better pace. Maybe you don't jump into 6 days a week. Maybe you jump into three and you
Yeah.
do 3 days a week for, a month, 3 months, 5 months, 6 months, and then you add 4 days a week and you do that for a couple of months and then you go to 5 days and it can be a much slower progression and therefore your body's not going to hurt as much. It's not going to be as drastic. You're not going to lose sleep. Your joints aren't going to hurt as much. You put yourself in a better position to go do that hunt.
Gotcha. Well, I already was planning on hitting the gym after deer season was over, so now I've got even more motivation, man. But look, I feel like I've kept you long enough. Honestly, I was really excited to do this episode. Been a big fan of Hoyt. There's a lot of guys, being buddies with T-Bone and Waddell, and they shoot Hoyts and just the whole influence of y'all's company. And I actually do listen to y'all's podcast quite a bit. When I see a new episode, I'm right on it. So I feel like I've known you guys for years, but dude, thank you so much for coming on. Is there anything that we missed? Anything we need to sort of tell people or anything you'd like to, shamelessly plug, promote, tell them what's coming?
I mean, honestly, guys, like if you haven't shot a Hoyt in the last couple of years, or if you've been debating on just buying a new bow in general, I don't care what manufacturer. The biggest thing I would tell anybody who's looking to buy a new bow is don't take the word of myself coming from a manufacturer or anybody else who is either got a YouTube channel or is talking or hosting a podcast or a buddy. Like go into a shop and test everything that you can head to head and have a budget in mind because again, happy wife, happy life, right? But if you know that your budget is $1,300 for a bare bow, okay, then you go in and you shoot every single bow in that price range that you can. And I promise you, one of those bows or two of those bows are going to just talk to you. And it's gonna be like, oh, okay, something just clicked. Okay. And just because you're in that bow shop does not mean you have to buy right there and then that day. Okay.
Yep.
Most of those bow shops, like when I was in a bow shop, I didn't want you to buy from me that day. Like you come in, you want to buy a bow. Okay, let's shoot these 7 bows. Okay, you like that one? Boom, let's go. Man, if you are tossing your head between 2 or 3 bows, don't buy that day. Don't make a fast decision because you got money burning a hole in your pocket. Okay.
Yep.
Go home. Maybe you look at those 3 bows. Look at a couple reviews. Okay. Get an idea for some things that people have said or this or that about them. And again, at that point, don't listen to me as a manufacturer because I'm gonna, tote and promote, right?
Yeah.
But go listen to some things that guys are saying about them and take everything with a grain of salt because you're going to have the guys that hate Hoyt and the guys that love Hoyt and the guys that hate Matthews and the guys that love Matthews and you're going to get that from every single manufacturer. Okay. So take everything with a grain of salt, do a little bit of research, walk back in on another day and shoot all the models that you had on your list and shoot them again. Okay. Do it with your eyes closed. Okay.
Yeah.
How does the grip feel? What do you feel in the draw cycle? Let the bows down. How easy are they to let down? Maybe the text will let you play with 85, 80%. Look at the adjustability of the cam. We don't have a micro tuning spacer adjustment. There's a lot of guys that want to do their own work that don't like that. I love the fact that we don't have a micro tune spacer system. Okay. Because when I lock both of my screws into my axle, that ain't going anywhere. So I don't care if I'm flying to Alaska, if I'm flying to Canada, overseas to go shoot a tournament, or going anywhere in the US, and that bow is either on a plane or rattling around in the back of my truck. Nothing can move if there's nothing to adjust.
Seems like a good way to fix it. I like it. Awesome, dude. Well, I think this might be the longest podcast I think I've done in a long time, but it's been a lot of fun.
Sorry, guys. I can talk with the best of them.
Oh, dude, so can I. My wife was just calling me and she was asking like what the plan was. She's like, I didn't realize you were still doing it. I was like, yeah, we're wrapping up. Don't worry. But anyway, man, thank you so much for coming on. It was honestly a great time. And I really want to get you on again.
Yeah.
Sometime later in the year. You mentioned something about TAC. Are you going to be at the Georgia TAC if they do it?
As far as I know, they're wanting me to be at all of them again this year. So,
all right, cool. Well, I'm planning on going out there. So if they do it in Georgia again, I will definitely swing by the Hoyt booth. And other than that, man, there's anything else? Any shameless plugs other than the new bows and everything else?
go test them, guys. I know our bows speak for themselves, so you just got to get one in your hands, and I promise it'll be one of the top 2 on your list.
I love it. Awesome, man. Well, thank you, Evan. It was a great time, dude.
Yeah, buddy.